The topic for this week's tip is about M1 increases, and there were some questions by someone in the comment section about M1 increases, which I generally don't respond to comments. So if you have a question, email me. My email is out there everywhere, particularly for students of mine. In the documentation you get, there's my email, and really it's out there all over the place. Now, there are a couple of types of M1 increases, and one of the confusing things about any kind of increase is the terminology. M1 can be used as a generic make an increase, and it doesn't really specify in a pattern. I've seen some patterns written like that. But in the master's program and at TKGA, we have very specific definitions of that. And there are three types of M1 increases. There is the open increase, and I'm going to demonstrate how to make these in a minute. And this is an example of a make one where it's open. And often you'll see those M10 to indicate that it's the open version, because you can see it leaves a hole at the base. Now what is immediately above that is a yarn over. And you can see that the M1 leaves a slightly smaller hole than a yarn over. So if you forget to put in a yarn over, you can always use an M1 open to do that, but you're going to get a much smaller hole. Again, these are yarn overs. And this swatch, labeled and blocked, is going to be in my blog. There'll be a photo of it. Now this is another type of M1, and notice that it leaves a little base, a hole at the base, and the reason for that is that you are using the strand between two stitches, and there's just no way to avoid a hole of some sort. How big it is just depends, but if you stretch it, it's going to be a hole. If it's all compressed, you might not see it. Now notice that the leg of the stitch is twisting towards the right. This is an M1R, or going towards the right. Now, in the master's program, we use this terminology because we often talk about mirrored increases and decreases, and this one slants in this way, so the mirrored one slants towards the left. And again, notice that there's a little hole there. Then up here, I have an M1 and left and right, and notice that the hole is maybe a little bigger, although I don't think so. But how I formed this was I made a yarn over at that location on the row before, because often what you'll find with an M1 is that because you're using that yarn in between, it will pull the yarn from the stitch to the right and make it tinier. And this is very pronounced in some people's work. And why that happens on the right, I think, is because you really have to stretch that yarn bar out to get that going. And notice in this case that that doesn't happen. That's because I made a yarn over there before, and I don't really see a difference in how it looks, to tell you the truth. Now, to make these increases, the M1 open is you just knit into that horizontal bar between the two stitches, and there you go. Done. Just that simple. Does leave a hole though. The M1 that slants towards the right, and these things are always hard to understand when you're reading a description of how to do them. But basically, you look at this, and how I remember it is if I want this bar to be slanting towards the right, I have to place it on this needle in such a way that when I knit into that stitch, the leg is going to be going towards the right. And you can see that this one really requires some manipulation and stretching, and that probably is why that stitch to the right is so small. Now that's the one going towards the right. The one going towards the left, I want the bar, or that, not the bar, the strand to be on top going towards the left. So I place it that way, and I work into the stitch, and I'm gone. Now again, there's a lot of confusion for these things, and I've seen designers, particularly in some Ravelry patterns where they have less experience writing patterns, use M1 as a generic word for an increase. And generally speaking, you know, it's better to be specific about the type of increase that you want. Because you could interpret that M1 as a bar increase, as a lifted increase, as a yarn over, whatever. So you want to look at your pattern to see what kind of increase it's specifying. And if it doesn't give you a glossary where it defines those terms, then it's not a very good pattern. Because if you're using a description in a way, an abbreviation in a way, and you haven't described it, then it's up to the user or the knitter, and who knows what they might do. Anyway, that's that.